Hello, my little piggies. Welcome back to the Chan. Hopefully we're not going to overdrive the mics here a little bit too much today. We had some problems with the recording, but I think we got it sorted out. But sorry if you hear some clicks and pops. Unacceptable! One of our fans sent me this interview here with Pam Bondi. She's being interviewed by two lawyers. They have a podcast. I don't know who they are or the podcast. I tried to find it. I couldn't. If anybody knows, please put it in the comments. But she talks about the Biden crime family, pulling back the layer on the corruption of the deep state, and tells a wonderful story about Donald Trump and really how unfortunate it is how he's been vilified in the media and how many people have drunk that Kool-Aid for such a wonderful, virtuous, giving man who is so caring on so many levels and such a unique individual. For him to have been vilified so terribly by the media and by the public, and how many people buy it, man, it is really, really sad. But let's get into this one. When I was recording it, I hadn't seen it at all at the time. This was my first time through watching it as I did the recording. I'm only re-recording the intro here because a bit of it was overdriven. But thanks so much for joining us here. Let's dive into this interview. It was really fun.
Democrats are following their same old playbook, one you're familiar with. It's war by lawfare against President Trump. So they did it in 2020 with this impeachment effort over these allegations that Trump was improperly interfering with investigations into Biden corruption and connection with Ukraine. But it turns out anybody can find this on the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. They've reported that the Bidens have received over $20 million in payments from foreign entities that are not friends of ours. People like China, Ukraine, Romania. They've concluded that, quote, Biden is compromised and our national security is threatened. So, Pam, you were on that defense team with Alan Dershowitz in that first impeachment trial, helping to secure an acquittal for President Trump. Can you tell us what was your insider take on that trial?
Now, before Pam responds, is anybody surprised that the Bidens are compromised? Is anybody surprised that 20 million seems like kind of a low number? Like if you and I took $20 from the Chinese Communist Party, the government would probably be all over you. Yet these guys are in prominent positions for their entire lives, like 40 years plus in politics and in Congress. And for the last 4 years as president of the United States, and previous to that, vice president, where most of his allegations with Ukraine and whatnot have happened, with calling Burisma, the phone call, bragging about getting the DA or the prosecuting attorney fired or whatever. So none of this is a surprise. To be honest with you, 20 million seems a bit low.
We knew very little about that much about Hunter Biden. And the whole basis for them to try to impeach President Trump was a phone call he made with President Zelensky. Now the whole world knows President Zelensky, of course, from Ukraine. And it was about Hunter Biden. And he thought some things didn't seem right. Hunter Biden was on the board, an oligarch's board. And Joe Biden said that they weren't going to get any money unless they fired a prosecutor who was looking at this oligarch's board. I mean, it was crazy stuff. And now, President Trump said it was a perfect phone call. And now, look in hindsight, of course it was a perfect phone call. Now we know even so much more about what Hunter and the Biden family were doing. And yes, I got to know Alan Dershowitz. I still talk to Alan all the time. And, Kelly and Nikki, to digress a little bit, back then, it's funny how just the world keeps changing. Professor Dershowitz, his big philanthropy, he gets people to help buy ambulances. You ready for this? For Israel.
Wow.
And now, after everything happened on October 7th, I get chills. I called him and I said, wow, look what your ambulances are doing now. Look what they're doing for our world right now, Alan. So that man does a lot of good. And, Alan's a Democrat. He's a lifelong Democrat. He's a brilliant professor. And he saw in that trial what they did to President Trump, and he sees what they're doing now. And of course, President Trump was completely vindicated, more so than ever now, because now we know so many. They had buried the details. We couldn't get half of those documents. We couldn't get a fraction of those documents during this impeachment trial because they were trying to bury him because they were going after Trump. And now everything that's coming out, we still all talk, Jay Sekulow, Alan Dershowitz, our whole team, Pat Cipollone, and we're like, can you believe this? All these documents that they buried and they knew were there, but we couldn't get them because they wanted to remove them from office. That was impeachment round 1. And then we keep going.
Yeah, right. It just keeps going. And that's what I want to ask you about next. But I want to follow up on what you just said.
You know, I'm always amazed when people think that our government doesn't do things that they think other governments do. Like, how do you word that? It's like the Van Halen song. Can we show a clip of that? Sometimes I feel like we've been watching TV and movies so long that the idea of like an evil guy going like, "Meow," and then we'll do this and they'll all fall for it. Like, the most obvious is the least obvious. Because when something seems so outlandish that they could never possibly get away with it, then you obviously assume that it's not actually happening. Like, that's not happening. That just happens in movies. Like, that, don't be so ridiculous. But when something is so outlandish, you can get away with it because it sounds so outlandish, it's hard to convince people that it happened. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments if you think I'm crazy.
Things that have come out, whether it's the Russia collusion, which has ended up being a hoax, and all these things where, you know, you look back and you go, actually, Trump was right. And they just keep coming after him, trying to, you know, I think in psychology, don't we call this projection, where you've got an issue and then you just project it on the person you're mad at. And the psychiatrist is like, actually, it's you. and that's the problem.
Crazy. It is. And I feel like it's such a concerted effort, and it's so diabolical what they're doing and what they've been able to accomplish. But you know, that man is so strong, and, you know, he should have been sitting in front of the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday, yet he was having to sit in a courthouse in New York City on something absolutely ridiculous. And it's nonstop. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up impeachment. I call it impeachment round one, because that really, he said from day one, it was a perfect phone call. I had the duty to question what was happening. And now, knowing what we did, of course he did.
Right. Well, and this lawfare is continuing. So now there's this imminent trial happening in New York. So they're trying to criminally prosecute him.
So, I mean, just not to pause again here, but hopefully you're following this. During Trump's first impeachment, they tried to impeach him for a phone call he had with, I think, Ukrainian president or prime minister at the time, or somebody in the law offices there, like the DA office. Basically, he tried to get them to look into Hunter Biden or look into the Biden family. I really should check it's been so long that now I'm forgetting the exact details of it. At the time, everybody knew why they were trying to impeach him. But the bottom line is, we have Biden on tape saying that he tried to use his power to influence the Ukrainian government, saying, you're not going to get this money if you don't fire this guy. And you go ahead and call Obama. Check it out. And now Trump is calling them when he becomes president to say, hey, we got to look into this stuff. Why is Hunter Biden getting paid all this money? What are we doing in Ukraine? Why is Biden getting money? Like, what is going on over there? Let's look into it. And of course, they're trying to say, hey, Trump's trying to use his power to influence and strong arm another country that is illegal, and we're going to impeach him. And of course, the entire thing was a smokescreen of lies to protect themselves. And now, years upon years upon years upon years later, and only the fact that Trump is so smart, savvy, strong, tenacious, continuous, and finally victorious, that we are able to move forward with this and maybe get some truth out of it. The truth that we probably all knew anyways. Like I was saying earlier, the most obvious is usually the easiest thing to hide. Obviously, Biden's taking bribes and making money under the table and selling arms, making oil deals, making power moves, insert nefarious activity here, go.
Allegedly paying for a non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels. And there's so much, I would just say, questionable conduct around what the prosecutor's doing. Even this Boston University law professor wrote, I think, the three of us are lawyers, so we would say a pretty compelling analysis in the New York Times, which is not a conservative paper, saying that this is a legal embarrassment for the prosecution. Yeah. And I was really persuaded by it. I know you were too. What's your take on this trial and how you think it'll turn out?
Yeah, so this.
Well, my take on this trial is I'm blown away when I talk to left-leaning or full-on leftist people in my life who believe all of this. They're like, oh, he like raped her and they tried to be quiet, keep her quiet with money, and he's a slimeball and 34 charges of embezzlement and illegal activity. They buy this shit. And when you try and show them evidence that not only is all of this stuff a smokescreen and a lie, and they're using the laws and the rules in ways they've never been used before on charges that have statutes of limitations that should be dead, and they're reviving them like zombies from the grave coming out of the ground with a alchemy of all sorts that most people don't use. Like, bottom line is they are twisting the rules and applying them in ways they shouldn't be applied to make this happen. And you show left-wing people the evidence. You show experts in the field, people that are even on their side 4 or 5 months ago saying, hey, this is wrong. Hey, this is outlandish. Hey, this is embarrassing. Hey, this makes a mockery of our country and our legal system and what is going on. And they just foam, like they seethe with anger. I am blown away at some of the leftists I talk to in my life that I have to try and avoid, who are so righteously angry and virtuous. They think they are so correct. And it's really sad because I can see the stress, the cortisol levels. Like, they are, not only are they jaded and they don't know what to do with themselves and with their lives, like, they are effing angry, and they think people like you and me are stupid, like ignorant, stupid fools, and they just want to, like, they can't convince us to be different, so they just want to murder us. Like, they're so mad. And you show them proof. Look, there's 3 people on screen here. These 3 people are all lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. I can go to another moron who's not a lawyer who thinks the opposite of me and be like, look, these lawyers are saying this, and they're like, they're morons. They're so they got a piece of paper on the wall. I don't care. Your argument from on authority. I don't believe in your school system and what taught. Obviously, they're idiots that weren't taught proper critical thinking skills, or they wouldn't be in the position they are where they are thinking the things they are, and blah, 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 blah. And man, leftists just make your brain explode with the fact that they could never be wrong and you're a stupid bigot. Sorry, let's go.
The Justice Department years ago declined to prosecute.
Involving federal crimes. The Southern
District of New York also declined to prosecute. The statute of limitations, which means for non-lawyers, how long you have to bring a case, has expired years ago. So now Alvin Bragg and the New York DA, they come into this case, and they basically airdrop in a special prosecutor who is from the Biden administration. You can't make this up. I mean, it's such a concerted effort to get Donald Trump. They bring him in, and at best, and there are no criminal charges here. We can talk about that in a minute, but they take a misdemeanor and they have to bootstrap it on to 34 felonies just to make it within the statute of limitations, so they can bring this case years and years later. There's no reason in the world to bring it other than to keep him off the campaign trail, and they're being successful at that right now. They're not going to be successful ultimately, but they're being successful at that because he's having to sit in that courtroom every single day. And the prosecution star witness yesterday, a guy named Pecker, who was head of the National Enquirer, said we did non-disclosure agreements all the time. This wasn't Donald Trump the president. Donald Trump was the celebrity. We did them for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He rattled off names and names of all these celebrities because that's part of business in the business world.
Darn right it is. People forget that this guy was not persona non grata till just recently. This guy was the man. People love Trump. They've loved him for years. And from what all accounts I can tell, the dude seems pretty solid. Anyways, from what I'm seeing here, talking about the campaign trail and other things, perhaps this is an older interview with Miss BONDI here. Somebody sent this to me, and I figured it might have been recent. These guys saying, hey, let's talk about your nomination and what's going on. But it seems like this was just before Trump won the presidency here and has become president-elect. So sorry that I've been interrupting so much. We're going to continue to the end of the video here. We can watch the whole interview and I won't interrupt. But if you like this kind of stuff and what I've been doing in the past, please like, subscribe, give us a comment, anything, get the channel monetized. And as a favor, I'll shut up for the rest of the video. You can listen to these guys talk about all of the just atrocious corruption that they have been putting on right in front of our faces, like the blatant, arrogant, nah, you can't do shit, and then lying to your face, like, what are you talking about? Sky's not blue. No, dude, that sky's not blue. What are you talking about? Look, no, dude, that's not blue. And then eventually you're like, I mean, he keeps saying it's not blue. I don't know the energy to even argue with him. That's what part of gaslighting that drives me nuts. You either finally get convinced. Sometimes I just think you don't have the energy. It's like you can't win an argument with a stupid person. So sometimes gaslighting is almost like, all right, fine. Like, I just don't have the energy to try and convince you that this mountain exists before I then have to have enough energy to still climb the mountain with you once you acknowledge its existence. Anyways, we exist. This interview exists. Let's get back to it. Hopefully I get a like and a subscribe. Thanks so much for watching the video, and let's hear what these guys got to say.
Billionaire, and people come at you and they're accusing you of things. And so, and you know, it's very detailed. And of course, Michael Cohen is the star witness against President Trump. And,
his former lawyer.
His former lawyer. So I don't know how they attorney-client privilege isn't applying here, number one.
Right.
Right, to my fellow friends and attorneys. And, you know, he comes in and says all this salacious stuff that he told him to pay her off. But then Pecker, yesterday on the witness, or this last week on the witness stand, he comes in and he says, listen, Donald Trump didn't know that Michael Cohen paid her off. He had no idea when we talked about it. And Pecker hasn't even talked to Donald Trump since 2019. So their case is falling apart, but they don't care. The goal was to try to embarrass him and to have him sitting in a courtroom, which they got him. You know, it's a criminal charge, as we know. It's not a civil case. You can't come and go. He has to be sitting in that courtroom. And then to take it a step further, you know, as attorneys, we know, you know, I prosecuted before I was attorney general for 18 years. And the gag orders used to be on me as a prosecutor. Prosecutors aren't supposed to be talking about the case because you're not supposed to hurt the defendant. All the rights here belong to the accused because he is innocent until proven guilty by a reasonable doubt. Yet they're letting Michael Cohen, that witness, he's out there every day trashing Donald Trump on TV. So they put I've never seen a gag order on a defendant in my entire career. They put a gag order on Donald Trump saying he can't talk about the court. He can't talk about, it's crazy. He can't talk about the main witness who's out there trashing him every single day. You can't make this stuff up. And really, as lawyers, it's a shame because this is what people are seeing. They see this isn't how our justice system typically works.
How do you think the Supreme Court will rule on that particular issue?
Yeah, and Nikki, it truly is. And Jack Smith, once again, is trying to rush this as fast as he can because he wants it, you know. Have you ever seen prosecutors rush a case? You know, that's the defense attorney's right, you know, to have enough time. And so once again, Jack Smith's at it again. But yeah, I think President Trump's attorneys did such a great job. And ultimately, I think they're going to rule probably late June, July, the Supreme Court. And there are three options. They can say complete immunity, case dismissed. Probably not the most likely thing given the questions they asked. They could say there's no immunity and say start trial tomorrow. Probably not going to happen. I think most likely what's going to happen is they are going to rule that there is immunity, but it's going to be remanded back to the appellate court, back to the trial court to make the determinations on what acts are immune and what acts are not immune, what acts were in his personal capacity. And, you know, so there's a case called Nixon v. Fitzgerald, and that established civil immunity for all presidents. And the inference is criminal immunity also applies. And I think all the justices' questions were right in line with that. You know, if we don't have criminal immunity for presidents while they're in office, I'm telling you, they're just going to become a figurehead. They won't be able to do anything. Every former president will be prosecuted by a political opponent, period. The one that should be the most worried about this is Joe Biden. Seriously, I mean, Harry Truman would have been prosecuted back in the day. You know, if you dropped a bomb, the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, prosecuted. Right. Abe Lincoln probably would have been prosecuted.
Yep.
Every single president would be subject to prosecution. So, and the Supreme Court asked very thoughtful questions that all the justices did. So that's my best guess. Of course, we don't know how they're going to rule, but that's my best guess. And once if it gets remanded back to the lower courts, it will take months and months and months of just briefing on all of these issues. And then it will be post-election and they won't care anymore.
Right. Jack Smith's whole strategy just falls apart in that regard. So
yeah,
that's great. That right there is a victory too for President Trump. And speaking of whom, you know, a lot of people wonder, why is it people on the other side of the aisle, even some Republicans, why are people so loyal to President Trump? Why are they so passionate about supporting him? And for those of us who've had some level of personal interaction with him. And I mean, I haven't had the kind of interaction that you and Kelly have had, but just the short interactions I've had with him, just a wonderful man who loves our country and is sincere and genuine in his passion to make America great. And so, wondering if you could just talk to our audience a little bit. You've had a lot of interaction with him. You've been with him for a while, supporting him, advocating for him through these various crises. Why do you stick with President Trump? Why have you stuck with him throughout all of this?
Well, I care about him like I do a family member. I mean, I've known him before he was president, before he thought he would run for president. I adore Melania. I was just at her mom's funeral recently, and you know, I get to see the real President Trump, not the celebrity. I got to see a husband supporting his wife, his grieving wife who had just lost her mother. That's the man that I know. He's a great father. His kids are all friends of mine. You know, and to tell you just like a personal story about the man that I know, Nikki, was one day, and it was when the world was about to shut down, and he was in the White House, and he was still up in the residence because he had been making calls all night long to world leaders. And I never tell personal stories about him really, but this one just is so important to me. And his assistant at the time was down in the Oval Office, and it was early in the morning. So I called her instead of calling him, because I don't like to call him early in the morning. And an organization that's like Make-A-Wish, it's called Dreams Come True in Florida, they had reached out to me. They tracked me down because they knew how close I was to the president. And they said, we have this little boy and he's dying of leukemia. And they said, all he wants, I get chills, all he wants is to get to talk to the president. We don't know how long he's got. Can you help us? And he had leukemia. Jake was like 10 or 12. And of course his head was, you know, bald from the chemo, and he had little friends with him. And they sent me all these pictures of him. So I sent them to the president's assistant, all these pictures. And I said, listen, this little boy isn't going to make it long. His dad is former military. His mom's a nurse. And when he was in the hospital getting his treatments, he was covered in the American flag as his blanket, all the nurses gave him. And he had on his MAGA socks, and he was just adorable. And he just loved the president. And that was the only wish that they hadn't been able to come true for this little boy. And they said, listen, he does not have long. It's really bad. So I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So I called the White House, and his assistant went up to the residence and said, President, the picture she didn't have there, they were on her computer. She went up and she told the president the story. I just told you this little boy is about to die. All he wants to do is talk to you. So he calls me. Pam, what's the number? What's the number? What's the number? We've got to talk to him. And he writes the number down. He writes the number down himself. This is our world leader when everything is going on in the world. And so he says, okay, let me call him. Hangs up. Makes a call, couldn't get through, calls me back. Pam, they're not answering. I don't know. So I called the little boy's sister, and they weren't answering because they were baptizing him at the time in the family pool because he was about to die. So I said, President, they were baptizing Jake. So he goes, okay, let me try again. So he calls back, he gets him on the phone, and all this was captured, the phone call, on video, because they had a videographer there baptizing Jake. So that's how I know the details of the phone call. And I'll never reveal that. It'll never be public, but it was one of the most beautiful phone calls I've ever heard between a man and a dying little boy who looked up to this man. And it was like a father figure talking to this little boy and talking to his parents. And it was just so beautiful and so kind. And so call ended, and the president called me back and said, thank you. I got to talk to him. Pam, let me know next week, how's he doing? Let me know how he's doing. Okay, I want to send him some stuff. So then the president, we hang up, he comes down, he's in the Oval Office, and I call it a swag room. They have a room outside the Oval Office with all this stuff, like stuffed animals, and all presidents have it, like really cool stuff for kids who come to visit and people. And so his assistant told me, he said, get me a box. And he went in there with a big box. This is the president. This is the man that I love, with a big box. And started filling it with stuffed animals and stuff, swag. And he saw the picture up on his assistant's screen of the little boy with a bald head in a golf cart with another child with a bald head, you know, because they were going through chemo. He saw it and he said, print that picture. And she printed it, and he wrote on there, I still have that picture I still have a copy of that picture. Dear Jake, please look over all of us in heaven. love Donald Trump. He framed it. He packed up the box. They overnighted it to the family. But I had a screenshot of the picture. So I got to call the family. I sent the family the screenshot of the picture. So Jake saw the picture. And then they overnighted all the things. And then the next day, they called back, Pam, did Jake get everything? And I said, no, sir. He died early this morning. But he got to see the picture that you signed for him. And now the family, they have all of that. And they asked if they could go public with the video. And, and I said, no, it was and they agreed. It was a private time between a man and a little boy. So that's the man that I know. And people could tell you 100 stories like that of things that he does for kids and family.
I said I wouldn't stop the video again, but yeah, there are hundreds and hundreds of stories about Trump. I hear the odd one, and I'm amazed how this man is so vilified. Like, can't he at least be middle of the road for a man who is so good? So good. I mean, it's what he's done in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords, and what he's done for this little boy, he's done for a lot of people. And I don't want to get emotional here, but when you are a man of power, of success, but also a man of grace and humility at the same time as being boisterous and fun, like, this kind of stuff is easy. When you have power, when you are happy and satisfied and challenged and always moving forward, when you are allowed to be a man, then this kind of stuff is easy. I had a life partner for a long time who was always angry at me because I do a lot for others. I'm very accessible to others. I work hard, I come up with ideas, and I'm happy to work in units. I can be a hell of a leader, but I'll make a great number two. I do not have an ego. When somebody has an idea, especially I work in construction sometimes where I am in charge, and when other people have ideas or opinions, I listen to those opinions. I respect them. I show the lowliest, most janitorial, first day on the job green guy the same kind of respect I show my workers who I know have experience and skills above me, but are either older, retired, or not. They don't have the personality, kind of skills to be in a position of authority. I show everybody the same respect, and that way I can take those ideas when I need to, but I can also listen to them and then deny them when those times come. And people don't take it personally because they know I'm willing to listen, and they've seen me take either their ideas or other people's ideas before, and I deny or turn down their ideas with grace and humility. And this kind of stuff is easy when you have it in spades. If I had everything that I have that I'm proud about myself, if I had 10 times more of that and all the things I failed at and don't have yet, if I had all those things, it would make everything that I do on a regular basis that much more easy. When I am at my most upset about not having enough money or enough time or the success I want, it's not because of my legacy or my own personal disappointments. That stuff exists. All men worry about that. All people worry about that. But it's the fact that I don't have the ease to help others. God, if I had 10 times the money I'd have, I'd still have the money I have now because I'd give the other 9 times away to other people. I would help, I would build, I would do. And the things that are hard become easier and easier and easier, not only with success, but with personal success, personal pride, personal satisfaction. Because life, love, family, satisfaction, and doing for other people is the only reason to exist. And it sickens me when people take a man like Donald Trump and won't even give him the 25 cents from the goddamn dollar he's not only earned, but he probably printed off and inked himself. Okay. People have told me I should start this kind of stuff because of my rants. Well, there was a pseudo rant. Let's see what Pam has to say here. Not much left in this interview. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Chan. And hey, if you listen to all of that and you're still here, man, give us a like and a subscribe. We'll see you real soon.
That's why the people that truly know him, Kelly knows him. People that know him, you love him. He's a good man. What you see on TV is the showman, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it is.
Appreciate that,
Wow,
Pam. Thanks for
powerful
sharing
story.
that. Yeah,
Sure.
it definitely brought tears to my eyes. We're coming up on a break. I'll talk with you, Nikki, after the break about my personal first encounter with President Trump. But I agree with you that, after you know somebody, when they get vilified and maligned in the media, then you're like, nah, not true. I know, false, fake news. I know that person. And then when you run for U.S. Senate and get vilified and maligned in the media with things that they've just completely made up. And you're like, well, that's how that works then. And then everyone just goes around parroting the lies. You're like, that's exactly how it's a slander campaign.
Yeah.
And it just catches fire like the Salem witch trials. And so everyone in their fear fest goes around spreading the lies and fears and fear mongering. I don't think anybody is perfect, and I'm not hiring a priest, people who also aren't perfect, to be the leader of the nation. I don't think any leader has held themselves out to be perfect, but this man is not who the left media portrays him to be. And as we've talked about all these trials by lawfare, they definitely have gone down, they've projected a bit and have gone down roads that in retrospect have proven Trump to be right. So I am hoping and believing that throughout the year he'll be vindicated by many of these trials, that they'll boomerang back and we'll all go, well, actually he was right. And I think a lot of America is waking up to see that that actually is the case, that this weaponization of the legal system might indeed be the greatest threat to our democracy and our republic, and a government led by the people. When a weaponized legal system, a weaponized court system, when the party in charge can use their law enforcement, their courts, their military to come down on the civilians of the United States of America, that might be the greatest threat that we're facing. And so we appreciate you being with us today, Pam. Thank you so much. Democrats are following their same old playbook, one you're familiar with. It's war by lawfare against President Trump. So they did it in 2020 with this.